Hi, BookTube. Uh, I'm just gonna cut right to the chase here. I'd like to talk about this, but before I can talk about that, I should probably talk about this to kind of give us some grounding. The Brain That Wouldn't Die is a sci-fi horror B movie, really more like a C or D movie, but we'll just say B, from 1962 that tells the story of a trauma surgeon, very gifted, skillful trauma surgeon who doesn't do things by the book all the time. He's kind of a risk taker, but he gets results. He saves lives, and he's got a beautiful wife or fiance. I don't really recall which. Who unfortunately, within about 10 or 15 minutes of movie time, is decapitated in a car accident, which would be bad enough, but even worse because this is the brain that wouldn't die. Unfortunately, our surgeon is not just a surgeon, he's a Frankensteinian mad scientist surgeon who has an interest in the new frontier, the next you know breakthrough in science, which is keeping severed body parts alive, severed crucial body parts alive, such as the head and arms and legs and such. And he somehow manages to recover his wife's head. I don't really recall what happens to the body, and takes it back home to his basement mad scientist laboratory. Hooks the head up to a series of tubes and wires, and manages to keep it alive indefinitely, and not just keep it alive, but cause the head to wake up every once in a while, and you know, and even speak and talk shit to him and warn him that he's that this whole horrible endeavor is doomed. But because he's a mad scientist, he will not be dissuaded, and at that point he heads into the city to find a suitable body for his wife so that he can reattach her head to the body, and they can forget this all ever happened and go on with their lives. So if you heard that plot, you might think, okay, that might be good, might be bad, but there's no way in hell that can be boring, right? And no matter how good you want the brain that wouldn't die to be, when you watch it, you will be confronted with the unfortunate reality that it's kind of a snooze. It's really not. It has two notable qualities. It has two noteworthy things about it. The first one is the title, which is just fantastic. It's one of my all-time favorite horror movie titles. I'm pretty sure in my Letterboxd entry, which I'll link down below, I said something like it's the prime example of a movie whose title is like the main thing it has going for it. And it's a title so good that if you haven't seen the movie in a while, if you haven't like thought about it in a while, and the title just kind of like pops into your head, you can almost trick yourself into thinking that, man, the brain that wouldn't die, like that had to have been good, right? Because how could a movie called The Brain That Wouldn't Die be bad? So great title. Number two, even for 1962, the movie is surprisingly lurid. It's surprisingly perverse. And I say even for 1962 because by 1960 we had Psycho, Peeping Tom, Eyes Without a Face over in France. But the interesting thing about Brain That Wouldn't Die is that it was actually shot in 1959. So in a way, it kind of predates those three movies and plenty of others. This is long before Herschel Gordon Lewis would bring gore to the screen in kind of a big way. But yeah, like it's just a really oddly creepy story for how old the movie for how old fashioned the movie kind of feels otherwise, because after the surgeon goes out and tries to find a body, you realize that he's not especially urgent about it. He's not just going to a morgue or to a graveyard or whatever and looking for any fresh body he can get. He kind of realizes, well, if I have to get a body, no matter what, that means I can kind of pick the body that I want, right? And so immediately he goes looking for burlesque dancers and go-go dancers, etc. It kind of, and it wasn't until I thought about reviewing this or talking about this that I realized that Frank Henenlotter's Frankenhooker is basically a remake of The Brain That Wouldn't Die, only with that depravity cranked up even further. Where in Frankenhooker you have the mad scientist character not only hunting for a body, but realizing that oh, I can like mix and match body parts, so I can take, if I want to, I can take the legs from this girl and the breast from this girl, and really just goes completely over the top. Frankenhooker, I can recommend just full stop, and Basket Case, and Brain Damage. Those three movies and a case of beer. That's a Saturday night. But apart from those two things, The Brain That Wouldn't Die, there's really not much to write home about. But it has had an afterlife. I would say largely because it fell into the public domain pretty shortly after it came out, which is one of those things that I would think is bad for business at first. But in the 50s, 60s, and 70s, if what you really cared about was your movie finding an audience and getting exposure and just getting out there, then it falling into the public domain was kind of a blessing, because that means that if your horror movie was in the public domain, it was pretty much guaranteed a spot on any monster movie marathon from that point forward. The Brain That Wouldn't Die also got picked up by Mystery Science Theater 3000, which brought it to even more people's attention. And so it has lasted. It has had an afterlife and a legacy. And that legacy, it all kind of culminates with this. This is the Brain That Wouldn't Die 60th anniversary novelization by Robert Freese, who is a writer who was completely new to me. And as far as I know, he is mainly a writer of horror short stories. And also, he writes articles and columns for horror magazines like Rue Morgue, that kind of thing. Fangoria. I mean, I'm not sure if he writes for Fangoria in particular, but just that kind of magazine. And a couple of years ago, he started to do these novelizations. So far, he's done The Brain That Wouldn't Die, Galaxy Warriors, Splatter University, and I believe there's a fourth one that has been announced or planned at least. And his novelization of The Brain That Wouldn't Die is surprisingly good. That runs the risk of overrating it, but it's for a novelization of a not so good movie, it is unusually good. And I think the secret here is that it is it's just done completely straight. It's not a like a satire. It's not laughing at the story. It's treating it like a just a rather a serious piece of pulp horror fiction. It puts you in the head of the mad scientist, and it puts into words the perversity and depravity and the creepiness and that the filmmakers could not put on screen back then. And it's better paced than the movie, which is kind of a weird thing to say. I mean, it feels like a tighter experience than the movie, and we're talking about a movie that's not even an hour and a half long, compared to a book that's like almost 200 pages. That feels like an achievement to me. Yeah, I have to recommend this, just as one of those odd surprises. I went into this thinking it was just going to be kind of a funny joke, and found myself reevaluating and thinking about the freaking brain that wouldn't die in a way that I never expected I would. The Brain That Wouldn't Die is not a movie that I would normally recommend. But I mean, if you're a fan of 50s and 60s B movies, you've seen The Brain That Wouldn't Die already. If you're a fan of MST3K, you've probably seen it. But if you haven't, I recommend that you watch it just so you can read this, and get kind of a lesson in how it doesn't matter how silly or how stupid or trashy your premise is. If you treat it with care, and if you execute it well, then you can have a solid book. I don't know that I'm gonna make these kinds of videos regularly. Just a standalone video about one particular book. But this is just one of those books that when I was first thinking about starting a BookTube channel, I had this book in mind. I had this in mind as one of those books that just kind of came out of nowhere for me, and that I wanted to shine a light on in some small way. I hope you check it out, and I thank you for watching.